Hey guys, we are back. I'm going to put up a banner to show what I'm reading. There you go, right there. All right. We are on chapter 72 of Steve Chandler's Shift Your Mind, Shift the World. And I'm just going to start reading, okay? We're almost done with the book, and we are going to start a different book, and I'm also going to be adding some hours during the day as well. I have a webinar coming up, so I'm going to promote that to you guys. All right, chapter 72. Eventually, you must serve someone. People today spend hours doing their social networking, getting connected and linked. I had a friend I'll call Charlotte, who spent a full year linking people to her network, up to 12 hours a day at her computer weaving her virtual web, and at the end had to declare bankruptcy and move out of her foreclosed upon home. She never figured out why such successful computerized hooking up never made her successful. Who was being served? I would ask her about the business. Tell me what you mean by that, Charlotte said. How are the people whose names you are now linked to being served? Silence. Lawrence Platt is a contemporary philosopher whose fascinating website is full of essays. Platt recently wrote this: there are occasions of absolute greatness which come on the world from time to time, carefully orchestrated events which seem so simple, so effortless in their execution, so natural that they appear to be deceptively easy. Almost always predicating such events is Herculean preparation, heroic, inspired bringing forth, driven setups, corrections, testing, then more corrections, still more testing, and still more corrections before the final product is ready for the world. This process that Platt is describing is so much more powerful and committed than hooking up and giving shoutouts. I am stunned by how beautifully he finishes his observation. When the finished product finally appears, it's hailed as masterful, as genius, as a champion of the genre. We know something happened prior to this to get it into the shape it's in, but we almost aren't ever privy to exactly what it takes. We weren't there to see what it takes to bring it forth in the state of mastery. To shift in the mind from mere social networking to really and truly working on something great that profoundly serves people is to shift from living on the shallow surface of life to driving toward the treasures of the deep. Chapter 73. Absolutely top heavy with expectations. Now let's revisit the earlier point I made about the weakness of expectations versus the creative power of agreements. Let's take a look at a hands-on, practical application. I was hired to coach and train a major international company in Ohio recently because they had all kinds of performance and productivity breakdowns. I was asked to go train their people using the owner-victim distinction. Owners are aware that feelings come from thoughts on the inside, and victims cling to the belief that feelings come from outside sources of causation, other people and circumstances and situations. The hope was that morale might be lifted among the people on the assembly line who were creating the products once they found a better understanding of where their resentment was coming from. And the hope was that after the training, better efficiency might follow. Well, the real problem wasn't on the line, although morale was low and efficiency was poor. The real problem, as always, was in the leadership. A fish rots from the head down. The leaders had nothing but expectations. They expected a lot from other people. They would walk around all day expecting things. They expected levels of job performance. They expected quotas to be met, expected quality standards to be hit, and expected customer deadlines to be met. They expected their directives to be followed and their emails to be eagerly read. After all, their subordinates were grown-ups with good jobs. They ought to behave accordingly. Why should I be a babysitter? Their heads and hearts were heavy with expectation and the inevitable disappointment and despair that is built in to a life of expectation. And then there were the stressed out people on the manufacturing line. They were trying to live up to the expectations of the leaders, but really resenting the leaders in the process. Some of them told me that most of the expectations were unreasonable and that the leaders didn't really understand how understaffed they were and how stressed they had become. So the whole place was in a morale crisis. As I moved among the leaders and talked to them, trying to figure out how we can fix this, they told me about a certain employee who wasn't living up to expectations. I said, "So what is that expectation?" And they would say, "Well, we expect him to get his job done by Friday so the customer can have the delivery on Monday." The customer expects it. We promised the customer the job on Monday, so we want it finished at the plant by Friday. Okay, great. So what happened? Well, it wasn't done. And it wasn't done until the next Thursday. So the customer was very upset. And this has happened so often that we have lost our preferred status with the customer and everything has gone downhill. Well, I said very quietly, who was in charge of that product being done? The line supervisor in the plant. Then I asked him a question that startled him, or at least quietly seemed to leave him without a way to respond. I said, "What was your agreement with him?" And he looked at me as if I had asked him, "Have you taken a ballet lesson today?" or some other strange question. And he didn't answer. So I asked him again what the agreement was with his employee on the finishing of the job. Then he said, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "On the matter of getting this done by Friday, what was your agreement?" "You may not have to have an agreement with everybody." "Let's just look at that one job in question. Are you saying I've got to go around and get an agreement for every job?" He knew I expected it by Friday. He got my email. He knew the customer was expecting it by Monday. I didn't want to have to go hold his hand. He's a professional. I'm a professional. But expectations don't seem to be working. Or am I missing something? Expectations aren't being met. Well, I don't know why that is. We had a long talk about expectations. I asked him how he felt when other people expected something of him versus how he felt when they had taken the time to create an agreement with him. He began to acknowledge that expectations might be counterproductive. He finally got an insight. People do not enjoy trying to live up to expectations. In fact, people usually rebel against expectations. Employees don't like it that you simply expect things of them without involving them in the process. There's no respect in that. And so we decided to experiment with leading by agreement instead of leading by expectation. We invited the line supervisor in and we all sat down. After discussing an upcoming job, the leader said, "Can you agree to have this job ready by Friday?" And the line supervisor said, "Well, I would like to, but I'm a little understaffed, so I can't promise it for sure." And the leader looked a little startled and said, "What can you promise for sure?" "If you gave me one extra person to work on it, I could promise it by Friday for sure. If I don't have an extra person, I can promise it next Tuesday for sure." The leader thought for a while and he said, "I'll give you an extra person right away. I'll talk to HR as soon as we're finished. Now, with an extra person, what can I count on?" "Well, you can count on Friday." "Thank you." And they shook hands. That's an agreement. That's so much stronger than an expectation, and it also leads to effective, timely completion of work because of the binding spirit of collaboration. It just flat out works, even though leaders often think when they ponder the concept that it would lead to an unnecessary time-wasting agreement meeting. But when they go beyond the concept and are willing to explore and experiment with it, they find that it saves time. Most new people I work with who are leaders don't realize the power of agreement. They don't understand that their leadership anxiety comes from the expectations they are carrying around all day. When I first talk to them, I ask what's going on. "Well, I've got problems with this person. I've got problems with that person." And I find out the reason they have problems is because they don't have agreements. They have expectations, and the expectations are not being met. Once they shift their minds up to the art form known as creating agreements, they start feeling more like partners with their people, and morale immediately improves. Sometimes it takes courage to try this out, but I've never seen creative collaboration fail as a leadership process, especially in comparison to leading by expectation and micromanagement. There is a mind shifting principle behind this story. It might look like it's merely a business management technique that only applies to organizations. But when I look more mindfully at what's occurring, I can see it applying to all relationships everywhere. A co created agreement is like a co written song. It has beauty and artistic satisfaction to it. My husband never picks up his socks. It drives me crazy. It's so disrespectful. It feels so demeaning to me to have to pick up after him like I'm some servant. Did you talk to him about it? Oh, I've complained a lot. I've lost my temper over it. So yes, One night I left the house for 2 days and stayed with my mother. Then I felt bad and came home. When I got there, you know what I found? Socks on the floor of the bathroom. I blew up. You can see where that situation is headed, and it isn't a happy place. But when the woman with the sock expectation was able to open her mind, we talked about the possibility of creating an agreement. It took a few tries, but the two of them found a time when they were both in good moods, and they created an agreement around the socks. To this day, it has been kept. All right, guys, I'm going to end with that, and I'll see you guys. Let's see, Tuesday. I'll see you guys Wednesday night, tomorrow night. Take care. Bye.